What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So the trade deadline is only 9 days away at this point. It's next Friday. Hopefully deals are going to start flying off the table like we saw right before the Four Nations when JT Miller, Pedersen, and Granlund all got traded within like a 24-hour window. But yeah, hopefully we get some action relatively soon in The Athletic, which if you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, you know is my favorite hockey site for in-depth coverage. Updated their trade board. Chris Johnston updated his trade board. Trade board 7.0. Again, Chris Johnston is one of the better hockey insiders on the planet. It goes like Friedman, and then Johnston's basically in that second tier with Darren Dreger and Pierre LeBrun. And yeah, we're going to go through it. Usually they have like 30-ish guys. And again, this is way more plugged in relative to who might actually get traded compared to mine. Ferrari targeted ad. Brock Nelson up first at number 1. And yeah, based on how the Islanders have been playing out of this break, it's only been 2 games, but lost to Dallas, got blown out by the New York Rangers. Yeah, it's looking like Brock Nelson isn't going to end up getting traded. He has not really been that good this season, but still should fetch my New York Islanders like a first-round pick. This guy's been a consistent, very, very, very good top 10, top 5 second-line center in the NHL the last couple of years. Any team that gets him will be really likely. I'm looking at like Minnesota or Winnipeg that badly need a second line center, or Minnesota now that they don't have Joel Eriksson Ek for the next couple weeks. Makes sense. No doubt number 1. Raquel number 2, though. I think I was actually reading something on The Athletic that said that he's not likely to get traded because he has another 3 years after this at $5 million. So Pittsburgh has like a tough decision on their hands because they could retain on some kind of Raquel deal, or they could retain on some kind of Erik Karlsson deal because they have Riley Smith and Jeff Petrie also retaining the season. You only get 3 retention spots. So that shocks me a little bit. That definitely shocks me a lot. Not saying I think that it's more likely that they trade Erik Karlsson, but making the money work with the Raquel deal might be a little bit tough. But I think Pittsburgh definitely should move off him. If they don't trade him at this year's deadline, they probably should trade him at this year's summer because he's hurting the tank. And at this point, Pittsburgh's definitely tanking. Number 3, Seth Jones. So I guess this is not just likely. They do it kind of like how I do it. Not only just likelihood of getting traded, also the caliber of player, because Seth Jones moving that money is going to be extremely hard. He's still a good player. He is definitely still, I think he's probably closer to like $6 million market value player, good second pair guy. But yeah, I don't know. It's been rumored for like Dallas potentially being after, and I really like that fit, but I don't know how you make the money work unless they retain like $2.5-3 million. If you're the Dallas Stars, you're not taking Seth Jones on for more than like $7 million. Ristolainen, another guy that has some term. He has another 2 years at $5.1 million. A guy that teams would be all over. I mean, in the first place, Philadelphia paid a ransom to get it, and I'm sure teams were also offering first-round picks. Plus, they gave up like the 13th or 14th overall pick in a second to get Rasmus Ristolainen. Overall, it's been a bad experience, but they're going to be able to recoup some assets when they end up trading him. Again, similarly to some of these other guys, probably more likely at the deadline. Someone taking on $5.1 million for Ristolainen midseason. I don't know about that. Ryan Donato. Okay, this is like an ideal typical rental, back on track like a Brock Nelson. He's been sneaky good. He has, I believe, like 19 goals, 20 assists for 39 points in like 57 games. He's been very good. Now, granted, part of that is because he's on Chicago where he's required to play more of an offensive role. But yeah, I think anybody potentially getting Ryan Donato is adding a really good middle sixer. He's definitely going to get a second plus. I don't know if you can maybe swing him getting a first-round pick just because of that AAV, just because if you half retain, that's a $1 million player for some of the guys. A guy like Brock Nelson half retained is still $3 million. So every team, even if they're extremely cap tight, can make it work with Ryan Donato, and that might make him one of the most valuable assets at this year's trade deadline. That Chicago obviously should trade him. He's 28 years old. What are you going to give him, some kind of like 5x5 after this season? Trade him. If Kyle Davidson doesn't trade him, that would be egregious. Dylan Cousins, another guy that I just can't see get traded at this year's deadline. I think there's far too much term and far too much uncertainty with him. He's been like a half a point per game player this year. Definitely has potential to rebound to the 2023 Dylan Cousins that we saw. But yeah, that would just be a little bit too aggressive from any team if they're like, yeah, we're going all in on a Dylan Cousins at this year's deadline. Maybe it makes sense if it's some kind of Pedersen deal where the salaries match up, two kind of disappointing players. And next up, we got Bowen Byram. I guess you could swing a Byram. That's like the heavily rumored one, Byram and Cousins for Pedersen. Byram is a pending RFA. So I think him getting traded at this year's deadline could make a lot of sense. I think he should be higher. I think he should argue. Well, I think the other guys should probably be higher that we're going to see later. But Yeah, I think there's a serious chance that he gets traded because he has been very effective. Are you going to offer him some kind of big deal, even a bridge deal? He's going to want like $5.56 million, and he's a lefty. He has been very good on the right side with Darlene, but yeah, it might be better just to move off him and kind of save that money and reevaluate because Kevin Adams might not be the general manager in 4 months. Scott Lawton, this guy has been top 10 on trade deadline boards for the past 2 seasons. Maybe he finally gets moved now. He now only has a year and a half left, $3 million. Again, just a solid veteran, as I say, veteran glue guy. That's what he is. He's a third liner. He can excel in that role. If Philly's willing to eat $500K, $1 million, I think it's possible that he gets maybe even a first-round pick. But they'd have to eat some money on that. If they just trade him at $3 million, they'd still get like a second-round pick. But yeah, if you're Philly and you want to retain some money, I don't know what the retention spots are looking like. But that could be interesting. Brandon Tanev, yeah, if you're Seattle, you should be having some kind of fire sale. Oh my God, his market value, his underlying numbers are not good this season. But every team's going to want a Brandon Tanev. You're going to have retain, maybe even get a team to retain even more on top of that. But he's just a very good physical fourth liner. It makes sense. Seattle should not be keeping a guy like this, although as fun as it is to see his headshot drop every single year of him doing you got to move off him at this point. Mikko Rantanen checks in at number 10. I don't think that he's going to get traded. And even they say that. He's a massive name. That's why he's kind of on this. And it is uncertainty, but like if you're Eric Tulsky and you flip this guy and you're going to get a decent amount, but that would just be very poor asset management. I know he didn't like Natchez that much, but I think you got to hold on to Rantanen. Interesting that his market value is only $10.4 million this year. I think you got to find a way to re-sign him. I think you need to, or you just use him as a rental. As much as that would stink for him to walk on July 1st, this team is good enough to go on a potential run. I can't see him getting moved. Braden Shen, I would not be touching Braden Shen if I was a high-end team unless it comes with significant retention. $6.5 million for a guy that has been rapidly regressing the last couple years. Veteran, captain, good leadership, but you'd have to get him down to sub $5 million, no doubt. And if you're the St. Louis Blues, do you want to do that on a guy that still has 3 years remaining? Like St. Louis isn't going through some massive rebuild. They're trying to do some kind of retool on the fly, so I'm not sure the likelihood of that. Kyle Palmieri should be higher, man. Expiring guy. He is from Long Island, so that gives me some sense that he might just say, like, I just want a team-friendly deal. I want to retire where I'm from. But yeah, $5 million remaining is a consistent, like, 25 and 25 guy. Ideal third-line physical presence. I think I don't know what the Islanders are thinking behind in terms of trading him. But, yeah, if he's getting traded, he's definitely a top 5 guy on the board. Carson Soucy, don't really have much to say about him. Defenseman, nothing there. If Vancouver is selling, makes sense to move off him, I guess. You got some young defensemen up and coming, and you just traded for Pettersson. Joel Armia, $3.4 million might be a little bit tough to move, but I mean, if you can get a mid-round pick, you got guys coming up within the system next year. Same thing goes for Jake Evans. I think Jake Evans, you definitely need to trade, considering how good he was to start the season. The stats are pretty solid, but yeah, definitely move off these two guys. In my opinion, there's really no reason, especially Jake Evans, sign him to some kind of like extension. I think that makes no sense when you have guys like Demidov, like Michael Hage, some other guys that I'm forgetting. Owen Beck hopefully will be an NHLer relatively soon. Casey Middlestat. Yeah, I think that the only way Middlestat gets traded is if it's packaging him for a better player, him and picks, him and prospects for a better player, because his value is absolutely in the gutter. He started out great this year. It was like point per game in his first 15 games, and then has been like 0.4 points per game since. It's been bad. It's definitely been bad. Gustav Nyquist, again, I think Nyquist should be higher on this list. I don't know why Barry Trotz wouldn't sell this guy. His value is definitely low, but you can probably get a second-round pick from a team, maybe a third-round pick, for a guy that only makes 3.185, 1.6 roughly at half retained, and had 75 points last year. Again, that was because he played with Forsberg and O'Reilly, but I think you can sell a team on this guy being a high-impact guy. Trent Frederick, I think after the Lindholm and now McAvoy, of course, being hurt with that shoulder thing, but more so Lindholm being out for the season, I think you got to sell Trent Frederick if you're the Boston Bruins. He is playing like shit, and I think some team would want him because he still is a physical menace in your bottom six, and it's not like he makes that much. Move off him. He's an unrestricted free agent. Get a third-round pick or something like that for him. Matthew Olivier, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I don't think that they're going to sell him. I think they're going to kind of keep their team. Provorov, maybe. Well, if you're trading Provorov, you might as well trade Olivier. Jamie Oleksiak, he could be a very intriguing guy. Bad this season, but has consistently been a 6'7" demon defensively. I think a team might take a swing on him in the offseason if Seattle does this kind of fire sale. But to take him on at $4.6 million midseason might be a little bit tough. Brock Besser, I think Besser might be a little bit higher on this. Vancouver is just in the shitter right now. Still can make the playoffs, but I think we all agree, even if they make the playoffs, they ain't sniffing shit. They got him and Marchand. These are the two premier wingers potentially on the market. Boston, again, if they still had Lindholm, if McAvoy didn't get hurt, I'd say no, just keep Brad Marchand. But at this point, man, he's going to be 37 in a couple months. It'd be gutting, but for the sake of the team going forward, if you can get a first and a second or a first and a very good prospect, very good young player, I think you maybe do it. Man. Because if you re-sign him on some 3-year deal at $6-ish million, like he has been falling off in recent years. So if he continues to fall off, first off, the Boston Bruins are not going to be a playoff team next year as well. If Marchand continues to fall off, then you're just not going to be able to flip him. So Besser, I think, even if they're in a playoff spot, even if they're in that 8 spot, unless they really show out these next couple games, I think you trade Besser. Brad Marchand, as much as it hurts, Boston Bruins fans don't want to hear it, but it might be what's best for the future. Brandon Carlo, not sure if I'd trade him, though. He's still pretty cost-controlled at 28 years old for the next 2 seasons after this. At $4.1 million, I think he could be a part of this retool going forward, but I understand if they end up trading him. Connor Murphy, yeah, I would consider moving off him, considering you have a guy like Artem Leshinov that should be hopefully NHL ready relatively soon, and Korchinski bumping up back to the NHL next season. Yanni Gourde should be higher on this, in my opinion, but I understand that the injury is concerning. He has a sports hernia. The timeline had him roughly at the same time that the trade deadline was, but if he is healthy and ready to go, you got to ship him out. Similar to Alex Wennberg, you got to get this guy out. You got to get a second-round pick for this guy. He's not a part of the long-term future, especially considering the amount of centers that the Seattle Kraken have in guys like Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, Berkeley Cadden, I believe, is a center naturally. Nicky B. I don't think Utah is going to sell him. This guy's been a Coyote and now a Ute forever. I think this guy's just a veteran presence. And if you're Utah, you don't want what's a 3rd-round pick going to do? Just keep him. Jordan Greenway, I could see him getting moved. Where's Jason Zucker? He does make $5 million, just a hefty amount, but he's been a very, very good player this season for Buffalo. And I think a lot of teams would be very, very interested in a guy like that. Ivan Provorov all the way down at 28. I saw a report that, I think it says this, that there's been no contract extensions recently. Like a month ago, they tried to knock something out. It's really going to come down to the next 4 games, man. If they go 1-3, maybe you sell them if you think you're out of the playoff race. But if they go 3-1, I think you say, fuck it. We're keeping it. We're trying to make the playoffs. The magical season, I think they say in this, it's been a magical season in terms of what they had to overcome this offseason. Nobody expected them to be here. But I think it still might be a little bit too hard to turn down a 1st and a 3rd-round pick that you could get for Ivan Provorov, considering he's without a doubt the best pending unrestricted free agent rental defenseman now that Pettersson's off the market. Mario Ferraro, I'd stay away from him. Unless San Jose, I don't think they even have retention spots, so I'm not touching Mario Ferraro at $3.25 million. No, thank you. Ryan O'Reilly, I think Barry Trotz should seriously look at this. I'd be all over him if I was any contending team at only $4.5 million. I'd give up a 1st-round pick in a heartbeat plus for a guy that signed the next 2 seasons. Yes, he's getting up there in age, but again, as you see, he's still, even on a dog shit Predators team, putting up pretty solid results. Last year had like 70 points. He's the perfect 3rd-line center. He's probably still a good 2nd-line center. He's a good, arguably 1st-line center last year. But if a team got Ryan O'Reilly, that would be very intriguing. And if Nashville traded him, they're just fully saying, fuck it, this core is done. Michael McCarron, I guess, just a depth guy that you might want to pick up. David Savard, similarly with guys like Jake Evans and Joel Armia, maybe you move off him. I think Savard, I could see you bringing him back for another season. I don't think Ryan Bacher might not be NHL ready next year. If you can get a 3rd-round pick, maybe you do it, but maybe you keep him. Brian Dumoulin, solid defenseman. Ryan Lindgren, this would probably have to be some kind of, I don't think the Rangers are going to do anything else, but this would be some kind of packaging him for salary cap filler to get someone else. John Gibson all the way down at 35. Great this year, but still 2 years left at 31 years old, and he has been very shaky. Edmonton is obviously like the biggest, like, oh, he's going to Edmonton. He's going to Edmonton. And I would like it if Edmonton went aggressive and went for a guy like John Gibson, but midseason might be a little bit tough to make that work cap-wise for a team like the Edmonton Oilers. Trevor Zegras, his name's always going to be floated in these. At this point, he's been so underwhelming that I don't think that you sell this low on him. Justin Brazeau, maybe a move off him for a third round, fourth round pick. Nick Robertson, another guy that's perennially in trade talks. Maybe he's a part of the package, as like he probably has the value of like a third round pick at this point, but maybe you package him alongside like a first or a second round pick to get somebody at this point. They just don't really give him the opportunity. Luke Kunin, solid depth forward. Maybe you move off him. Anthony Beauvillier, Islanders legend, but doesn't have a ton of value at this point. Kuzmenko, after getting traded, back on the board, $5.5 million. I don't see a team touching Andrei Kuzmenko, and I don't think a team would go through the hoops to get him double retained. He's not worth it at the point. Actually, has pretty solid underlying numbers. Erik Karlsson, Karlsson, I think this offseason could get traded. Just a lot of movement, $10 million AAV. And as we talked about before with the Penguins, they only have one retention spot, so maybe they do it on someone else. And then this summer they go for Erik Karlsson. But yeah, someone's going to need him retained like $2 to $3 million like a Seth Jones, especially considering he has 2 years left and he's already 34 years old. But that's it. They just threw Erik Karlsson in that last spot. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this list? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Again, Raquel being number 2 is kind of crazy considering he has a lot of term left, but he is well worth $5 million right now. Let me know. John Gibson being down at like 36 was a little bit wild. Let me know what you think. I'm going to be doing like predicting where trade deadline targets go. I'll probably do that tomorrow or maybe Friday when we're a week out of where I think the top rentals for the most part are going to go. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.